I'm Taysom. I'm with Dairyland Laboratories. Dairyland Laboratories is an independent feed forage testing laboratory. Our primary location is in Acadia, Wisconsin. We have 3 laboratories throughout the Midwest. And Dairyland Laboratories has been around since about 1959. And we do forage testing in 42 different states, 6 Canadian provinces, at least a dozen foreign countries. So that's our background. Probably one of the more important aspects of a high-quality nutrition program. High-quality forages is something that the dairy producer really has some control over on his operation. And being able to quantify that so you can have a good estimate of the amount of protein, fibers, how digestible that fiber is pretty much the foundation of all rations that are balanced up. So forage testing is probably the most fundamental basic concept that a dairy producer can use as far as getting the most out of his homegrown forages, or even what he's actually going to purchase. How often to test is really an interesting question because it varies so much. By that I mean some people like to test moistures on a weekly basis, some people like to test every month. I think the primary reasons to forage test though would be to, number one, monitor moistures, and you don't necessarily need to send it to the lab for that. A lot of people have on-the-farm moisture testers, and that's very basic, fundamental. You get the highest amount of return for that on the farm is testing for moisture on the farm. Second would be, if you know you're going to go into a new forage or a new bag, that would be the opportunity to also add another test. To really tell somebody they should test on a weekly basis or a monthly basis or every other week, there are people that do that, and I think they find value in that, but it's more so trying to get a handle on when they think the forages are going to change. If you're into a different cutting, or if you're into a different field when it comes to beef crop silages, that's more of the time that you want to look at an additional forage test rather than from every week or every month standpoint. I think most people are on some type of monthly program or minimum. There are some very large dairies that we do work with that are on a weekly testing program. So I think it's like everything, find out what works for you, what your nutritionist is comfortable with, how often you think your forages are going to change in quality, and try to capture that in a forage testing program. Well, actually this year, thankfully, for a lot of producers, forage is really high quality. Last summer we had good growing conditions for our hay crop silages, and even though the fall lingered on with the heavy wet forage in the fall, overall corn silage, the hays and the haylage is really high quality. And that helped a lot of producers in this financial crunch because they were able to get more out milk out of their own homegrown forages. As far as trends, that would be the biggest thing that we saw. Obviously, when we got into October, we had prolonged wet weather. Things just went dry, and that's when a lot of the mold problems started to come about. And I've been with Dairyland Laboratories since 1986, and I can honestly tell you, this is the biggest problem we've had with mycotoxins across the upper Midwest in 24 years that I've been with the laboratory. Both in the number of samples that are coming in, the levels of toxins that we are finding are 2 to 3 times higher on average, and it's a significant problem. Well, a couple of things. I think you need to try and be a little bit more proactive. I think in this year, I wouldn't say this in most years, but in this year I think it's safe to assume that to some degree you're going to have a problem with it. You may not be able to find the individual mycotoxin when you send it in, although we can try to find them for you. But things of just being proactive, trying to feed up your worst feed stuff first, give them to your lower producing cows if you can. Say the good quality stuff for your higher producing cows, because they're the ones that are going to be more susceptible to production problems, mycotoxin problems. Obviously, a good use of binders and acids and things of that nature when you're trying to restore that feed will all go a long ways to help you get through this problem. difficult in our laboratory to spot trends because we cover such a wide geographic area. But in talking to one-on-one with nutritionists, I do hear that comment, and sometimes the forages are a little bit lower. And that could have to do with a lot of reasons. Potassium is what we call a luxury consumer, meaning if there's an abundance of potassium in the soil and the forage isn't growing very much, that the plant will uptake that potassium whether or not it needs it to grow. Now, like last year where we had good weather conditions, cool, the plant grew quite a bit more, maybe there wasn't as much potassium in the soil, so there wasn't as much uptake in it. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just that when you come to supplementing it, you need to make sure that you're testing your forages for the right potassium levels and making those corrective actions in your supplementation. So I think by and large it had to do with high fertilizer prices last year, maybe not as much fertilizer to spread on the fields. Second, we had really good growing conditions. The plants grew very well. Maybe the length or the height of the plant was taller than other years, so there just wasn't as much potassium in there. When you get to dry cow rations, things of that nature, it's really important to monitor those levels and to pulse up cows. My advice would be just to make sure you're on top of that. You're not just assuming a certain level is in the forage. Really quite try and quantify it to make sure it's going to fit your